My silent movies. I remember when Santa Claus left a kid's movie projector under our Christmas tree for me. It was electric, but only to light the projection bulb to shine through the film, and the adjustable ends to project the movie onto a hanging pillowcase or onto the wall. There was no sound. These were silent, moving pictures. There was no motor to turn the film reels, just a hand crank for operation. You could stop cranking at any time to get a good look at any particular scene. There were 50-foot reels of Tom Mix movies and others, but my favorite cowboy was William S. Hart, sometimes a villain turned hero. I was glad he was not really interested in girls. When the movie was almost finished, I would crank the projector much faster to cause William S. Hart to have his horse gallop full speed down the Sunset Trail and vanish over the horizon. Yes, my aviation record. I remember when Leroy Afton was my co-pilot on December 17, 1993, when we flew from Clearfield, PA to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, in an attempt to set an aviation speed record over a recognized course on the 90th anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. All the necessary paperwork was filed and approved in advance. Shortwave pilot's airplane, a 4-seat, single-engine Cessna Cardinal, was fueled the night before. So we completed the pre-flight inspection, checked the weather, and lifted off the runway. Bob Ashcraft, the Clearfield airport manager, officially recorded our start time at 7:01 a.m. The weather during the flight was excellent. No morning fog, a slight tailwind, good visibility, and some high clouds. We made a slight dogleg to stay west of Washington, D.C. Our arrival time was recorded on the ground as we flew overhead of the destination airport at 9:43 a.m. That was a time of 2 hours and 42 minutes, a distance of 384 miles, and a speed of 142 miles per hour. Upon landing at a nearby airport, we were congratulated and then transported to the anniversary activity at Kitty Hawk to watch several flyover flights and hear some speeches commemorating that first flight in 1903. Leroy and I took time to ascend the hill to the huge marble monument honoring Wilbur and Orville. We snapped some photos, ate lunch, and fueled the airplane. Leroy flew the return trip home following the Atlantic coastline up into the Chesapeake Bay before heading to Clearfield. On February 7, 1994, the flight was certified as a USA and world record by the Federation Aeronautic Internationale in France. An awards ceremony was conducted on March 13, 1994, at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. 7 presentations were made by the Honorable David R. Hinson, the Federal Aviation Administrator. I felt humbled when he presented the plaque to me. The most notable award of the 7 presentations went to Mission Commander Richard O. Covey and his crew of the STS-61 shuttle flight for their 5 spacewalks to successfully repair the Hubble Space Telescope. Drown proofing. I remember when our swimming instructor at Georgia Tech, Coach Fred Leno, became famous for teaching us Navy students how to survive in deep water for hours using very little energy, even if injured. He called it drown proofing. We learned how to stay alive in the water, even with our arms tied behind our back and ankles tied together. It was really tough for non-swimmers, but Coach was determined to help them become survivors if their ship ever sank. He knew that you can stay at the surface if your lungs are filled and your body is vertical. Our first session was used to teach us how to stay vertical with our face underwater for 10 seconds, then with a slight kick and head back, exhale and inhale quickly to keep the lungs full, and back down. Repeat about every 7 to 10 seconds. The next week, we did the same for a while, and then finished the session with our hands clasped behind our back. This led to having a rope tied around one wrist and holding the rope with the other hand. It took a couple of sessions until we were ready to have both wrists tied together. If you panicked, you could always kick, turn over on your back, and swim to shallow water in the pool. We were nearing the end of the 13-week course when our ankles were tied. We started with our hands free and moved through the same steps, working up to having our hands and feet both tied. This training proved to the class that what we thought was impossible in the beginning actually turned out to be a good talent to have before being assigned to a ship on the ocean. My co-pilot. I remember when my co-pilot, Evelyn E. Bowers, sat next to me on our many flights throughout most of the eastern United States for almost 50 years. She held my charts, watched for other aircraft, controlled the cockpit temperature, and slept a lot, just what a pilot needed. Evelyn and I shared 69 years together, and we worked well with each other. I built a new house for her, and she provided a good home for me and our children. A Ford trimotor airplane. I remember when A 12-passenger airplane landed at the old Clearfield Airport near Cold Hill about 1938. It was a Ford trimotor with a radial engine on each wing and one on the nose of the fuselage. It came here to give Clearfielders an opportunity to experience the thrill of seeing their hometown from above. I was just a kid, but I saved up enough money to have my first airplane ride. We took off to the east for a 10-minute ride and circled one time to the left around town and then landed. Never did see our town because I sat on the right side of the aisle and Clearfield was always on our left. 50 years later in Florida, I had my second ride in a trimotor. Again, sitting on the right side, but this time in the co-pilot's seat. The pilot allowed me to fly and make some right turns. Thank you, sir. Dinner with the Amish. I remember when our son Paul and his wife Debbie invited their friends, an Amish family with 6 children, for an afternoon of fun in their backyard and dinner in the house. Evelyn and I were also invited. When the meal was ready, the hot items of food were set out on the kitchen counter so everyone could fill his own plate. Paul called for the ladies and girls to get in line to get their food, and the men followed. We visited after dinner and learned about some Amish culture, and we were invited for dinner with our new friends at a later date. We found their home to be quite similar to our house. They had running water, which was fed by gravity, but no electricity. They had bright and efficient gas lights and a gas stove. Dinner was served buffet style, like Debbie's meal. However, the order of being served was not the same. There was an emphatic announcement that men would eat first, then women, and lastly, the children. Men need to be well fed so that they can be strong and healthy breadwinners. Georgia Tech Wrestling. I remember when Clearfield was best known for its outstanding wrestling program under the expert leadership of Coach Arthur Weiss, especially during the early 1940s when I was in high school. We had unbeaten seasons, lots of state champions, and wrestlers with perfect win-loss records. I worked after school and so was not involved in any sports. After graduating, the U.S. Navy sent me to an officer training program at Georgia Tech. Colleges in the South didn't have wrestling in their sports program at that time. One of our Navy officers had been involved with wrestling at Kutztown State Teachers College in Pennsylvania and was given permission to start a wrestling program at Georgia Tech. He ordered floor mats, set a date, and put out a call for volunteers for the team. I liked wrestling, but didn't go out for the team because I already had band practice after our afternoon classes. After 3 or 4 days passed, I was ordered to report to Navy Headquarters office. The lieutenant asked me to explain why I hadn't turned out for wrestling practice. He told me that he knew that anyone from Clearfield surely must be a wrestler, and ordered me to the gym the next afternoon. After 2 weeks on the mats, he agreed with me that I hadn't learned much about wrestling by watching wrestling meets while sitting in the bleachers back at Clearfield High. He allowed me to go back to band practice. Pennies and Nickels. I remember when pennies and nickels were useful coins because many of your purchases were an amount less than $1. Now these coins are a nuisance and a bother. They aren't necessary anymore. Let's round out the total purchase amount, including taxes, to 5 or 10 cents. Then we can use dimes and quarters, along with paper money, to buy with cash or receive our change. Even the 50-cent piece would not be needed. For example, if your purchase, let the clock stop ticking, I'll back up a little bit. Then we can use dimes and quarters, along with paper money, to buy with cash or receive our change. Even the 50-cent piece would not be needed. For example, if your purchase was $1.15, you would pay $1 and 1/4 and receive a dime in change, or pay 3/4 and 4 dimes. If your cost was $2.40, you would pay $2 and 4 dimes, or $2 and 2/4 and receive a dime change. Payments by check or credit card would not change. The United States Mint could save many millions every year by not stamping out the 1 cent and 5 cent coins. How would this affect you? Amaryllis. I remember when the flowering bulbs with the large bright red blossoms called amaryllis were scarce and difficult to find in time for Christmas blooming. Years ago, I bought one for Evelyn, and she loved it. That was a reason enough to start getting one for her every year, and then for our daughters too. I planted them in the pots so the bulbs only needed to be watered. A few years later, I increased the list to include our daughter-in-law, some of Evelyn's close friends, our granddaughters, and some other relatives. Each December, they have a contest to determine whose amaryllis grows tallest, has the first open blossom, the most blossoms, or the most leaves. It gets exciting as we await Christmas. Falling snow. I remember when the winters seemed longer, the temperatures seemed colder, and I know that the snow was deeper. At 6 years of age, I looked out through the window during heavy snowfalls and knew my mother would not allow me to go outdoors. Don't even ask. Wait till the storm is over and the wind stops blowing. she'd say. Looking out, I'd stare upward at the falling flakes, and soon my brain would fool me, and it would seem like the snowflakes were stationary, and the window and I were rising like an elevator. I had to look away to make sure I was still standing at the stairway window, not moving at all. Children can find many ways to entertain themselves while confined indoors on a dreary day. Our wedding day. I remember when Evelyn and I declared our marriage vows in the St. Mark Methodist Church on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia, on a Tuesday afternoon, July the 11th, 1944. It was a modest wedding held in the pastor's office. 5 people in all: the Reverend Lester Rumble, his secretary standing for Evelyn, my roommate from Georgia Tech, Eugene Fennell, and the bride and groom. A serious, intense atmosphere prevailed until I stammered while trying to say, "I plight thee my troth," and Gene couldn't hold back his laughter. That broke the tension. And the rest of the ceremony went flawlessly and pleasantly. After leaving the church, Mr. and Mrs. Rodney Bowers walked to a drugstore for an ice cream sundae. That was it. The coal bin. The coal bin. I remember when most houses had a coal bin in the basement. It was usually a small room and as near as possible to the furnace. Sometimes there were boards stacked against the door opening to keep the coal inside the bin. The bin was filled up in the fall with, hopefully, enough coal to last all winter. The delivery truck was backed up to the coal bin window, and the driver placed a chute from the truck bed into the window. Then he shoveled the coal onto the chute. A tarp was usually placed on the ground outside to catch any spills and make it easier to clean up any coal that fell on the grass. If the coal was dry, it was dusty, and that put coal dust all over the cellar floor. And then there were those dirty, dusty ashes to be removed from the furnace. Sometimes those good old days were not so good. See the Mason-Dixon Line. I remember when we were flying in the vicinity south of York, Pennsylvania, and actually saw the Mason-Dixon Line. Not just a change in the pavement of the road beside a sign that says you are now entering Maryland, but we saw it by looking at the landscape. This is what we saw. And then there's a picture showing the Mason-Dixon Line as you would see it from an airplane. No alcohol. I remember when the Great Depression of the 1930s was a financially difficult time for most Americans. Newspapers sold for only 3 cents. I delivered city newspapers, and not many families could afford to buy the Clearfield Progress plus a city paper too. So my customers were few and far between, but some of them had good incomes. The tavern owners. This required me to enter 8 taverns plus the state liquor store 6 times every week. As a 13-year-old kid, I witnessed some things in those beer joints that made me think seriously about alcohol. One evening, I saw a drunken mother sitting at the bar while her baby, with a dirty face and wet pants, sat on the floor playing in the spittoon. I decided then and there that alcohol would never do that to me. Now just think of all the beer money I've saved to spend on airplane gasoline. Our woods. I remember when we started looking for a suitable place to build a new house for our family. Evelyn rode a bus to school, but didn't like it and didn't want our children to have to ride the bus. She wanted to live near the woods, but not out of town where the kids have to travel on a school bus. After searching for a period of time, we heard of some ground in the borough that had lots of trees. The land belonged to Dr. Moore, who was not ready to sell, but was willing to discuss it. He said, "Make an appointment with my secretary so we can talk." The appointed time came, and we talked, but never about the land. Then he said, "Make another appointment so we can talk some more." After 7 appointments during 9 months' time, we finally completed a purchase agreement. We had to cut down some of the trees to build the house, but Evelyn wanted trees. The adjacent land, composed of 3 lots, still had trees, but was the property of another owner who wouldn't sell just 1 lot. It was 3 or none. We were disappointed, but not for long. We then realized that we could buy 3 lots and sell 2 of them, but that never occurred. We bought all 3 lots and have enjoyed our woodland with the squirrels, birds, and rabbits ever since.